Stefan. I'd like to start by thanking all the people who have made it possible for us to speak today and to meet you. We are very glad. So many thanks, Stefan, Charitos, and many thanks, Chris. We are very glad to be here today, and we are very pleased to be able to discuss with you about this topic that is about engaging students and teachers to use their multilingual repertoires as a resource for learning and teaching. And maybe it is a universal topic for everyone, but maybe with different practices and theories all over the world. Of course, to discuss this issue, we would like first to focus on the European and particularly French context. And we hope to be able to exchange with you in such a way as to build bridges with the North American field and particularly here in New York and University.
Following an introduction, we will therefore approach our two-part presentation in two stages. To begin with, I will briefly present the current state of knowledge in the field of language acquisition in children, then adult students, and then in a second stage, Nathalie will return to the implication for the teaching learning of foreign languages. Our illustrations will be based mainly on the French-speaking world. Naturally, we will be delighted to answer any questions you may have following our talk.
So Christophe has already presented Jérémi and myself, so I don't think we need to go back to this. And we can just go to the other slide. It's about languages in Europe and in France. I would like to say that in Europe, of course, we are in a multilingual context, but what is very awkward sometimes is that even if we have more than 200 languages spoken in Europe and especially in France too, well, it is difficult for university and schools to acknowledge that this diversity regarding cultural and language experiences can be useful for the teaching and learning. And it's a pity because, you know, regarding PISA evaluation, sometimes in Europe, we are very bad at learning languages. So it's a shame in a way that we do not use all these languages we have in our in Europe and especially in France. We have European institutions such as the Council of Europe, the European Commission, even the ECML, which is the European Center for Modern Languages, which offers resources for language teachers in Europe. They provide specific policies regarding the way to include all languages in the classes. So in this way, they are completely in phase with the researches regarding promoting any language and cultural experiences that can be helpful to transfer from one language to other languages. But well, the national policies are really sometimes reluctant to offer training for teachers regarding these different aspects. So there's a new recommendation from the Council of Europe. It was in 2022, and it promotes the fact that we have to develop plurilingual and intercultural education everywhere in Europe. So it's very new. But actually, it was very, very, you know, it didn't impact in a way the fact that we could train teachers regarding multilingualism in the classrooms. So to begin with, Jérémi will give a brief history of language acquisition today to show how it can be linked to different theories.
So during the 20th century, different theoretical conception of language development in children intersected in continuity with what has existed since Greek antiquity, since more than 25 centuries ago. Herodotus explained the origins of language as innate, because In mythology, the god Cupid spoke at the age of 3 days. So you're probably familiar with Skinner's behaviorism, Piaget constructivism, and Chomsky innatism. For Skinner, it is environmental stimuli that condition human behavior, and he considers verbal speech to be a behavior like any other. For Chomsky, this is not the case, because he has tried to show the biological basis for the emergence of speech and language development. For him, language as a faculty precedes thought because we cannot think without language. For Piaget, it is thought that pre-exists language, since there can be no signifier without a signified. The complexity of the object of research has enabled Vygotsky thinking to return to the forefront in the 1960s in the USA, and in the 1980s, then 90s, then 2000s in Europe. In this continuity, researchers such as Brunner, Bronkhart, Tomasello have also been able to develop interactionist approaches, while Camilo Smith, for example, has been interested in connectionist approaches. So my question is, where do we stand today? My personal view is that language is constructed in social practices, and that it has in particular a social purpose that we call socialization. From there, it invites us to not forget that a student is also a child in the psychological and developmental sense of the term, and that a student is also a human person with all its complexity peculiar to human beings. In developmental psycholinguistics, we have been working for more 50 years now in the US and Europe on the links that may exist between what happens with first languages and the other languages that human beings learn. For example, we examine the language-speech dichotomy, as well as the issue of evaluating speech, for example, in the classroom, give the complex realities involved. A final point that seems essential to us is that of the social representations that we all have about the subjects, and which tend to make us think in one direction rather than another, without this prevailing about the truth or reality. For example, do the linguistic reality of the spoken word really correspond to the reality of the thought that is expressed? Do we think with an accent? Do we think identically whatever languages we speak? So we are at least certain of one thing, and that is that learning one's first language or languages is complex and not obvious, otherwise there would be no debate. We can therefore return to some fundamental principles like that popularized by Saussure. Speech is human, languages are the languages of the social community, and language with a big L, language is the language of humanity. To this statement, we must add the importance of non-verbal dimension of speech, which adds a further dimension to this complexity. And we shouldn't forget the non-language factors linked to language, such as social psychology, cognitive psychology, emotional psychology, sociology, cultural anthropology, biology, etc. Finally, what interests us today is that the other languages we learn after our first language or languages are built on these existing base. Take the phonological awareness of a Spanish-speaking learner. It's structured and the phonological system of Castilian, for example, for vowels, 5 oral vowels. In French, however, there are more vowels, 16. The aim of the phonetics lessons will therefore be to modify the structure of the speaker's phonological awareness to enable them to construct new phonological oppositions in order to differentiate U and U, for example. It should also be borne in mind that the issues involved in language development go far beyond the strictly linguistic domain. By learning to speak, we are doing more than just learning to speak. Identity issues are also central. I'm thinking of Bourdieu, and is show me how you speak, and I'll tell you who you are. Of course, we also have to take into account our representations, including on our own as teachers of the world, of ourselves, of others. Because language is a vehicle and a goal of socialization, Jean-Paul Broncard in Geneva explained that children learn to become social persons, which brings us back to the issue of psycholinguistic development, but also to the social and cultural dimensions they are linking to it. That is why, for 2 decades, European pedagogy for learning languages has developed action approaches, meaning activities where the social person is involved. Finally, what we know about language acquisition is that the mechanisms are complex and systemic. We know that not all children speak a language in the same way at the same age, and that there are several possibility paths in language development, depending on whether we start with lexis or articulation, semantics, or syntax. We also know that there are different speeds of development, which explain why there is no point in comparing children's language levels. It's very important in the classroom. For adults, it's not necessarily so different, since we mustn't forget that an adolescent, teenage, an adult is a former child, and that praxis plays an essential role in the fact that we become social persons. This has numerous consequences, particularly in the field of language learning, since the necessary conditions depend on the variability of criteria that may or may not be present in L1. But what is universal in the process to learn? The way how languages are made of, syntax, sounds, lexicon, etc., and the social issues it implies. Now, I would like to speak about bi-plurilingual contexts because they are very common and most of our students can have experienced this situation where their mom's language, dad's language, and they speak both languages or even more. Now, a child doesn't have 2 brains. And we know right now, that bi-plurilingual children have more cerebral plasticity and are therefore easier to learn new languages. These researchers are interesting considering that multilingual repertoires can help developing and the learning of new languages. We can also speak more than 1 language in a given social context, which ultimately happens in the majority of countries in the world for 2/3 of the world's population. Even in Europe, there are officially multilingual countries such as Belgium, Spain, and Switzerland. And in officially monolingual countries such as France, it's estimated that more than 80 languages are spoken in the country by native speakers, regional languages such as Occitan, Breton, Creole, and immigration languages too. More generally, English and French are spoken on all 5 continents as a result of the colonial history of England and France. In this context, children and students are in daily contact with several languages beyond the family unit. Finally, I've already mentioned the third possibility of bipluralism, migration and mobility. In this case, many questions have been asked since the 19th century. How do you integrate into the new societal environment? How do you teach a foreign language to learners who may have experienced psychological trauma? Can teaching a foreign language which depends on individual characteristic mentioned here be done in the same way for everyone? So we come to the central point in our presentation, which is to reflect on the possible links between what we know about L1 acquisition and ways of teaching foreign languages. How can we take account of the different possible statuses of learners? The development invites us to take into account the diversity of ways of learning and speaking. How can these variations be taken into account in the teaching and learning of a foreign language? It also requires us to give special consideration to the particular social interactions that are child-adult and student-teacher relationships. It's up to you.
So now I will try to show you a kind of design that is called language diamond. It is a design that refers to the fact that we have an underlying competencies, as Jérémi described, in L1, L2, L3, and so on. So it is the double iceberg that you must know, I think. It's Camin's design, and it's very interesting because I think thanks to this new theory, you can really, during your class, use the whole repertoire of your students in order to have an impact and to be more efficient in the new language the students learn. So this theories has been, described in the CFR, which is the Common European Framework for Learning and Teaching Languages in Europe. And this notion of plurilingual and pluricultural competence tends to posit that in a single individual doesn't have a collection of distinct and separate communication skills according to the languages he or she has some command of, but rather a plurilingual and pluricultural competence which encompasses the whole of the language repertoire at his or her disposal. So it was written in 2001. It was a long time ago. And actually, even now, it's difficult to have this idea that when we teach a new language in our pedagogical way of doing this, well, we should manage the repertoire of the students in a way that the different languages and varieties that make up the repertoire shouldn't be approached in isolation. Well, I'm in the French course, so forget all about, about other languages. But no, it's a way to take awareness that all the languages, can be very useful to learn a new language. But of course, well, for France and even in Europe, we have a way to train teachers, language teachers, that we are very good specialists in different languages, but not really specialists of pedagogical activities and didactic. I know didactic is not, you know, a very, very powerful word in the US. I know it, but well, it means in Europe, didactic is a way we think about the pedagogical activities we can do with the students. And I think this level of reflection is very useful and powerful. And the way of thinking about the multilingual repertoires is very important. It was in the guide for the development of language education policies in Europe. And well, it's a vow. It's you know, something we wish to, but for the moment, well, we see it's just starting, I think. All the teachers are concerned, of course, if you are teaching languages, but if you teach languages and cultures through a content such as economy, literature, and so on, of course, it's the same. I mean, you are very, well, teachers should be aware the way it works for a student when he or she learns new language. So I made this design. It's about recycling languages. I think recycling is very important today with all the environment issues we have. And I think it's the same for languages, because I hear too many times, well, forget all you know about your languages, just, you know, learn French as a second language or English as a second language and so on. And especially in France, when we hear interferences between languages, instead of taking awareness that it's a transfer from L1 to L2 or from L1 or L2 to L4 or L5, we say, oh no, just forget about it. Don't consider it. And well, it's not a resource to think about the different errors and a way to learn something. Most of the time, we just push it onto the carpet. It's what we say in France. No, please come back. And then the second level is to take awareness and to be conscious that it is the way we learn. Of course, when we have transfer that are positive, you know, if the vowel U already exists in your first language, for instance, of course it will be transferred to the second language. But we do not see that as a language teacher. They say, oh, okay, we don't bother. But if it's an interference, if it makes an error of it, well, it is a way that sometimes we just do not take it into account. So I think it's a problem here. And if we take into account this kind of transfers, we see interference, we have conscious of it. The third steps, and that's we have seen in our different research in Europe, is that the students, they can infer themselves. They say to each other, oh, okay, maybe it's because you don't have this vowel, or you don't have this phoneme, or maybe the syntax is different from some languages you can know, and compared to French, for instance, as a second language. And it's very interesting, the dynamic in the class that can occur if you allow the students to work like this in the classes. So there's another model that I designed. It is called the language diamond. It's a way to show that we have diamonds when we speak a diversity of languages, and with different faces, different facets. And of course, if we propose activities regarding the different faces, well, it is a way to shine in a way. And it was also a way to valorize and to promote other languages in the classroom, because especially in France, we have many regional languages or languages from immigration, and they are not the good languages to learn new languages, you see? So it's a problem, because for the brain, as Jérémi explained, it's all the same. And moreover, it can be very, the students can be stigmatized because he's not allowed to use his Swahili or Igbo, or, you know, so it's a problem, because in France we are the country of fraternity and equality, but well, not for all the languages, so it's a problem. So this design, it is called also the language diamond, and it's a together design, because it is all together that we can, you know, propose that this dynamic in the classroom. And the different letters, it's an acronym, shows that you have different faces that you can have awareness of. And the first phase is to think of ways of identifying and recognizing and promoting the various languages spoken in the classroom, because sometimes we don't even know what are the repertoires in the classroom of our students, because they are not allowed to speak about it, or they can be ashamed of it, or they can think, well, I don't speak too much in this or this language, so it's not useful to learn French. But even if you are in A1 level in Spanish, A1 is for beginners, and you learn French, well, it can be useful. So don't say it's not relevant. It can be relevant in a way. So we will see the activities for the phase regarding the way to identify and recognize the different languages. There's another phase about organizing activities using languages and cultures as a resource. So you will see some of these activities. There's another phase, it's about the way to gain and create multilingual material. So here you are in a beautiful language center we have just visited. So I think you have many books regarding different languages. But of course, you can also create or ask the students to come with, I don't know, literature books in different languages. And it can be useful also for the activities you propose. Another phase is about encouraging mutual mentoring. So the students can help each other, and not only the students who is very good in the new language, that can help and scaffold to the others or to the other students. No, of course, you can see that it can be interesting for all the students in the classroom. Another phase is about tying up together environment in and out schools and university to learn and teach. And I think if you learn French or Italian, I'm sure you have communities of Italian populations in New York, or French population in New York, and it'd be very useful to work with these communities. And another phase is about honest parents and family resources. So of course, maybe in schools, it's more relevant than in university, but I think the families can be very useful too to promote a new language. And the top of the diamond in light green is about encouraging and relying the teachers, whatever the subject, together in a community of practices. Because especially in France, language teachers, sometimes they are isolated, or maybe they have training sessions among the same language, such as French teachers or Spanish teachers, but not all together. So I think it's, well, in the different projects, European projects we proposed, we saw that when the language teachers are all together in training sessions, it's important because they have more in common than they think sometimes. So for the first phase regarding identifying languages, I'm sure, well, you may know the language portraits or language biographies from Bush studies and others. And it is what we do with our students each year. It is a nice way to present yourself with your multilingual repertoires. It's creative. It is a way to speak the new language. So here it's French as a second language, but it can also be in any language, of course. And here you have the one of our students, she's from Brazil. And for her, the multilingual repertoires she has, it is like a Skype with the different languages when she speaks with her family and so on. And for another students, it's about a mobility from Africa to France and the way she has, learned the different language, informal, formal, or informal ways. And we have other examples of students saying, well, for me, speaking different languages, it's like different tastes. So he brought spoons with, different, different flavors. And well, I think it was really interesting because it is an emotional way to identify and speak about your language. And of course, you do that in the new language you learn. So it's very efficient. Here we have a language trees. It was in a school, but we can do the same at university with the leaves, with the different colors regarding the different languages spoken by the students, but also by the teachers. And I think it was really an important time because some teachers allowed themselves to say that they could speak also this language and so on. And before the activities, I think some of them didn't dare doing so. And so it was nice. So if you want to know more about this kind of activities, there's a website on the ECML platform called Maledive, Majority Language and Diversity. And you can have all these examples and videos and so on. Another phase which is really important to me is the way to use languages and culture as a resource. And I think there are two ways of doing so. I think there are, well, I don't want to be in a stereotype saying that it's more in North America, but I think with all the translanguaging theories and practices you have in the US, especially, it is a way to speak, read, or write in various languages, from the language you know to the language you learn, Garcia and so on. No, please come back. And another way we do a lot in Europe, and especially in France, but in the European programs, you can see that very much. It is about language awareness. It is the meta level when you think about comparing languages and what is common, what is different, and what I said about the fact that we can recycle languages. And it is a way to speak about languages, but it is, you see, a meta level. So I think we have more developed this aspect in Europe. So here, for instance, if you teach literature through the lens of multilingualism, if you teach French as a second language class, and you want to give the example of Baudelaire, a poem, and so on, so it can be in French. But what is interesting is that the poem can be brought in different languages the students may know, but of course they can bring their own version of Élévation of Baudelaire. And of course, it is a way to understand the French text, but it is also a way to understand the context, the literature content. For example, hyperbolic figures, alliterations, repetitions, and so on. So it's very interesting because it is a way that, of course, you can translanguage, you can transfer, you can understand very easily, but it is a way to understand more about the content and to be at a meta level regarding the content. So now, if we speak about the meta level, if we speak about comparing languages, it is an ordinary cognitive activity. And of course, if we speak different languages, it's like the rabbits and the carrot. You think, well, we don't speak the same languages. We can't transfer anything. We can't compare anything, but of course not. For instance, in Chinese Mandarin and in English, well, the morphologic the verbs and forms are very minimal. And of course, it can be, you can compare this. And it's not only the fact that it's the same family languages, and you can compare only the languages from the same family. You can compare any languages because the processes, as Jérémi said, are the same for phoneme, syntax, and so on. So I would like to show you just an extract about the meta level. And I wanted to show you this for kids. Of course, we can do the same, and we do the same at university. But I think it's interesting because it works for everyone, even if you don't have the meta-linguistic way of recognizing it's an adverb, the morphological form, and so on. But of course, you can reflect on languages. It's very interesting to see how it works with kids, because you see it's a very ordinary way for the brain to work.
Ce mot, s'il y en a un seul, ou s'il y en a plusieurs. Et en plus, à la fin, on voit aussi comment c'est une lettre. Est-ce qu'on entend?
So here it is a class with newly arrived children from Russia, from also Morocco, and so on. So you have Arabic, you have Russian, you have Mandarin. And of course, the teacher doesn't know how to speak all these languages, but it's not the purpose. The purpose is not to learn the multilingual repertoires. The purpose is to transfer, to have a meta level and consciousness that is developed and that can help learning the new language. And we do exactly the same with students. And it's really interesting the way that it can motivate the students, because they understand that they know more that they can say in the beginning. Another phase of the language diamond is to use multilingual and multicultural materials. So here you have a beautiful sanctuary. So I'm sure you have many multilingual resources, but of course the students can bring resources from home. And of course, also you can create your own resources like multilingual posters and so on to, I don't know, memorize lexicon, syntax forms, and so on. Another phase, as I said, is about setup reciprocal mentoring. And here it is about Bruno theories on the whole. And the thing is, I think it's important that we allow the students to use all the repertoires to be able to help someone. And it can be in Arabic to understand something, in math as French as a second language, because we have many Arabic words. For instance, when you give a French lesson, which is a new language, in math and so on. So you see, it's a new way of being empowered in a way, and not because you are good at a new language and that you can help another student. What we did a lot too is to use our context outside universities and school in the multilingual and multicultural way, as Vygotsky, Bronkart, and Jérémi said, because we do not learn languages only in classes. Of course, the more we learn, the more we do. It's at home, it's with our friends and families and so on. So here you can see a multilingual visit in a Museum of Fine Arts near Montpellier. And it was really interesting because the kids, the students were able to offer the visit in different languages. Of course, French, which is the second languages they learn, but in many other languages. So you can see all the videos. We won't have time to see all the videos, but on the LISTIAC website, which is a European project about linguistically sensitive teaching in all classrooms, and you have all the videos regarding these projects. Another phase is about including parents and communities. Well, especially in France, where it's difficult to include parents, especially here, we have worked with Roma families or Gypsy families. And it was interesting because, for instance, regarding the multilingual visit in the museum, they were able to help the kids to write about Romanian, to write about the different drawing and pictures for the museum in Romanian and then in French. But of course, it can be the same in the university with the communities, because, as I said, in New York, you have so many languages and population, and of course, you can work with different museums and populations and even restaurants. I don't know. Well, the last facet is about working as a team, and I think it's difficult to make this effort to find time to work all together. But we are all teachers and we teach different languages, and we should be all together to think about the issues of what we do and not being separated or isolated because we learn French or we learn Arabic and we learn Turkish, and it has nothing to do. I think we have seen that the theories show that it has something to do. So the language diamond approach is just to show that we have focused in theories about hetero or homoglossic context, and that it can have an impact of learning a new language. Of course, it has an impact, but it's not the only impact it has. The same with translanguaging approach. I think it's really important to provide activities suggesting and encouraging translanguaging in the classroom. But I think it's also important, and it is what I try to design with the language diamond and the way to recycle languages, is that maybe it's important to have today a maximalist and holistic vision, a kind of pan-language approach, and meaning that all the different parameters can be useful for the students. And maybe it can be a way to for universities to develop as a place for social cohesion and the valorization of multiple experiences for the benefit of all, and to support students to live in our multilingual and a multicultural society. So now we are ready for questions and discussion.
I encourage you to ask questions, not only audience here, but Chris, if you have questions, you may help, can you please? So please, I open the floor.
Barbara?
I work in the middle of angry and the face about and I like to mark the stress and probably there is more focus on language awareness.
Yes.
But just languaging is definitely, even if it is born in Europe, you know, it's starting pretty well, speaking well,
Yes.
right? So, I think that the aspect of awareness and consciousness is really important. And I mean, mine is just a comment because I have adopted, you know, the plurilingual approaches of the long comprehension in my classes, because I generally teach an introductory Italian language course, which is open to students who know already at least another Romance language. So which is connected to Italian, of course, but now actually they have such a rich plurilingual repertoire with, you know, also very distant languages. And I found that they really have this kind of interest, you know. Actually, I was in one of my courses, I was not sure if I could accept a Chinese student, because the prerequisite was to know at least another Romance language. And she told me, you know, I know just Chinese, Mandarin, and Latin. I study Latin, and I said, okay, Latin can help you, of course. So I said, okay, fine, we can stay. And actually, when we started to create cross-linguistic materials, she actually added some comments, and she felt part of this educational path. And at the end, during the I always give them some evaluation of the course. How can I improve the course? And she said, you know, I don't understand why this course should be, you know, the prerequisite should be just, you know, for Romance language speakers, because, you know, it can be really helpful for anyone. And I also use some plurilingual materials, which I created with a grant I had from the university. Because, as you said, you know, we always talk about training teacher, because we need to be trained, because we have this attitude, monolingual attitude, right? But I think because I've been teaching this kind of courses for several years, I was focusing on, you know, I wanted to give them more. And not just creating cross-linguistic materials. Of course, the target language was always Italian, but just creating more connection. And also I worked on identity construction as well. So I was very inspired by the project, Marie project, and other projects. But I realized that they were not, because teachers need to be trained, but also students, because they don't, you know, it's very difficult for them at the beginning to accept that. What is, you know, this kind of approach, it would be a waste of time, so you need to convince them. So I developed my own materials for them. And I, of course, integrated with different kind of activities to create cross-linguistic materials, but also to develop a lot of language awareness. So I think that the point is, to conclude, that also students really need something, you know, very specific for them. What plurilingualism is, why it's so important in our contemporary society, because they, at the end of this, I experimented this material, which are in our Columbia YouTube channel, and they are, you know, they really developed a very, you know, important awareness of what to be plurilingual means, not just in terms of cross-linguistic comparison transfer, but in terms of identity. And I remember a comment of one of them who said, you know, I'm very glad, because finally plurilingualism makes really sense, because I feel like a global citizen. So I really want, you know, this connection with multilingualism, mobility, social mobility, etc., was very meaningful to me in order to understand what global citizenship is, what to be a global citizen is. So I think, you know, also that kind of attention should be also focused on them, because I also focus a lot on teaching, training teachers, but I think that students, I saw this kind of development, and I thought it was fantastic. So, you know, I don't know if you have inputs, you know, if you have your feedback about the work on language for praise, because I think also that work is very important as well, because they develop this kind of idea. Also because they, sorry, that's it. No, it's just because also they don't have idea of a partial competencies. They think, oh, I don't know that language because I can just, you know, understand a few words, but it's already something. So, do you involve this kind of, you know, concept to develop this awareness with your students, or do you do a kind of similar work, or that was my question. Sorry.
Yeah. No. It's a very interesting question. And, you know, we do not work only with the university students, but also with primary and kindergarten children. And I think it is, you know, a very nice way if we want to provide this kind of activities and way of thinking, well, the sooner the better. So, of course, when we do that in kindergarten and primary schools, well, it's kind of natural for the kids. And then when they go to university, well, to have a multilingual repertoires and different cultures and so on, it's very ordinary, and they know that it can be useful to learn something else, such as new languages. But you're right, sometimes the students can be reluctant, because when we offer the possibility to do a language portrait, some of them say, no, I speak Creole, but I don't think Creole is useful. Do I have to put it in my portrait because my mom has always, you know, it was forbidden in the house and it was only with the grandparents and so on. But I think it is interesting because it is a way of speaking with them about it, and to use a sociolinguistic approach with them. So, you know, we switch from the activity to the sociolinguistical, you know, theories and so on. So maybe it is a good way, and it provokes a kind of conflict in the brain, but it's interesting because it is the time for them to develop awareness about the way we work with our multilingual repertoires and cultural experiences. You want to add something?
I think that thinking about conflicts is definitely very useful.
Yeah, because conflicts are positive. I mean, in our schools and our universities, sometimes we think, well, you know, the world is so conflictual. Well, we do not want to bring conflict in the classrooms, but I think it's cognitive conflicts are useful.
Mm-hmm.
I think in France, the teachers are afraid by that. And in the primary school, the teachers don't know very strongly what is a child, the development, the cognitive activities, language activities. There is no many courses in the training sessions for them. And it's a very, it's the hard problem about that.
Excellent. I also have a quick question. My name is Zhongqi. I'm from Chinese language program. Thanks again for the talk. So during my experience learning English as a foreign language, my English teacher told me thinking in English and discouraged me from thinking in my native language, which is Mandarin. So today's talk gave me the impression that your perspective contradict that advice. So should we just tell students you can use, you can think in your first language or any language you are comfortable with during the class? Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
It's a very interesting question. I think what we do in research is counterintuitive, but well, it works scientifically. So we know that we have many assumptions, such as speak in the new language and think in the new language, but it's not, you know, like this. It's not like in a click, and you can't decide that now I will think in this language. And, you know, it's like when you start dreaming in a new language. And we know that when we start dreaming in a new language, sometimes it's because we have reached a kind of competency like a B1 or B2, and then we start. So I think it's not something you can't decide. But when we offer this kind of activities, I also think that it is just ways of offering activities. It's not a way of working all day long in your class. I mean, of course, there are times when you speak and you don't translanguage, or you don't translate, or you, I think what we say about pedagogy in Europe now is that it is eclectic, and this vision is, you know, part of this eclecticism, and it's not to replace. And I think, well, our godfather in our research center is Edgar Morin. It is a philosopher and sociologist known about the complexity he sees in the world. And I think it is complex. So it's not to replace this kind of thing. I think sometimes we have to, you know, think directly in the new language, but I think that we can also offer spaces to other visions, like the vision of taking into account multilingual repertoires. Mm.
And I think also, maybe the different theories about monolingualism are made by monolinguist locutors, and it's when human person who were bilinguist, okay, worked about this, focused about this point. Wow, bilingualism is fantastic. Bilingualism is magic. No, it's not magic. It's not fantastic, but it's not worth than okay. And I think today we can think with tranquilo, como se, slowly, easy, you know, and maybe we can you can have a scientific approach to consider the different points of view about bilingualism with children, with teachers, with students, in the societies, and well.
And I think multilingualism can also become a new ideology, like translanguaging or like language awareness. And I think it's dangerous too, because I don't believe in unique theories. I mean, it's, you know, if I propose a pan-language approach, it's because, no, we have to link all the theories all together, and we have to decide, and maybe it is the role of the teachers. We have to decide what is the best approach at this moment of the class and so on, and we can change every 10 minutes regarding the approaches. But I think it is it is what is didactic in Europe. Didactic is about the way you choose what you want to do with your students in your class, and I think it's very important.
Maybe also it's not easy to consider to go to the first language for learning another languages. It's not easy to consider it. It's easier to say, okay, forget it, and it will be good. And in France today, maybe again we can hear that commentaries. Yeah.
I always think, sorry, Oh, sorry, no, because I always say, I mentioned this quotation from Stenos and Gorter. And I always mentioned that also last talk, actually, that the LRC organized that if you treat students as monolingual, they will reply as monolingual. If you treat them as plurilingual, they will behave as plurilingual. And I think that is, the ABC, right? So very interesting comment. Thank you.
Yes, please, just if you go on speaking the microphone for people like this. Oh.
Just, okay. Hi, sorry, so, right, and, I'm João, I teach Portuguese here, and I actually have a question that is related, but I was thinking of a multilingualism, but in our own language, and I'm thinking of France and French immigrants, because I was reading in the summer, I probably read the Le Français va bien, and to me, what it was striking about the text is that they mentioned the Swiss, Canadian, French, and Belgian linguists. And then the first paragraph, they talk about the largest French-speaking city being in Africa. And there's not one linguist from any colonial, post-colonial. So how do we work with multilingualism in our own language in terms of, because I feel like a lot of immigrants in Europe coming from post-colonial territories, they face a lot of difficulty in education because it's not considered French, it's not considered Spanish, it's not considered Portuguese. And so how do we can work with this approach in a more understanding of a multilingualism in our own language?
Right. In Montpellier, we have very interesting repertoires because we have kids from Morocco that can speak Rifin, kind of barbarian languages. And then they were taught Arabic at school. Then they went to Spain when they could be taught Castiliano y Catalan. And then they arrived in Montpellier because the family has found the jobs for them. So, and it's interesting because all these repertoires, all these languages can be useful in a way in some activities that we propose. As I said, we have many words in Arabic in math. So when they do math as a French as a second language, it can be useful. But when they are taught Spanish or Portuguese as a second language in schools, well, it can be useful to use the Catalan or the Castiliano and so on. So it's very interesting because it can valorize all these repertoires. It's not about European languages such as English, German, and so on. It's about even oral languages, such as languages in Africa that are not written. For instance, they can be very useful. We had a wonderful thesis when one of your students, PhD students, Justine Dolbach, she was with unaccompanied minors from Africa, and it was interesting because when they learned French as a second language, the way to write in French, they said, "Oh, now we are able to write in our own African languages, of course with the Latin alphabet, but it was a way to be able to be very powerful with a written language from Africa, even if this language is not written." So I think it can valorize if it's what you mean. It can valorize not really.
It means that it's not always a second language acquisition and practice. Maybe sometimes it's the first time for writing, or the L3, L4, L5, and the teachers in France are in Europe and many countries destabilized and confused by the situations, because it's not like in the books, foreign language, learning and teaching a foreign French as foreign language is like this. No, it's not. It's never the same reality.
But maybe
your question was different.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the first language speakers of a French or any other colonial language who are not considered first language speakers mostly get you. And my point is that I feel like there's been a lot of discussion with the recent immigrants who have a hard time in education because their accent or their way of it's not considered proper. Because French, Spanish, or Portuguese. Now, I'm thinking of the first language speakers in French who are not necessarily considered native speakers because of racism or because the consideration of what a language should be. And I think
Just because of the accent, for instance. Well, I've got a beautiful quotation about Bernard P. from Switzerland. He says, what we say about multilingual repertoires, it's the same for a unique language, meaning that the way so it is that. So the way we deal with different norms, and that, for instance, the Portuguese from Brazil is not the good one, or if you live in remote Brazilian areas, well, it's not the right Portuguese, and so on. So and of course it can be the same because, well, in the LISTIAC project, linguistically sensitive teaching in all classrooms, it was about linking the different languages, but also it was about thinking in the new language like French as a language, that you have different norms and that you don't speak the same way with France in the different contexts, that everyone has an accent. And it was kind of social linguistics awareness in the new language, and of course saying that it's the same for other languages in the world, because the way we speak, of course, it's the way Bourdieu says so. It's the way we are in some categories and so on. So to me, there's no differences between, because at university I teach both multilingualism and also sociolinguistics for as French for anyone. And the way we are natives, but more or less considered, even Bourdieu is from the south of France. When he came to Paris at the CNRS, which is the most powerful research centers in Paris, he said, well, I had to forget all about my accent from the south because it wouldn't have been considered as relevant, or even for politicians. We had a prime minister from the south of France, and we thought he had been chosen just only to be mocked at because it was a very difficult period. And of course, it's not relevant. So it's very interesting to consider both, not only multilingual repertoires, but also what I call, after Blanchet and Marcellesi and so on, plurinormalism. I call it plurinormalism.
Question of how consider the speech variations in but I'm sure in New York City or in USA it's okay, but in the big town it's the same. And as a French, I heard different accents, and it's not always easy to understand someone with the accent. And in France, it's the same. Many people from Paris have difficulties to understand those people with les accents, quand on articule comme ça. But sociolinguistics says it's the same for any countries, in any localization.
I think what we wanted to say today is that what we would like to think about is that we have universal processes about languages and about plurinormalism and multilingualism. And instead of saying, well, we have to promote this approach, or I think what is more important is about the universal processes, maybe.
Like
And the good question is how to teach these points, and it's not very easy.
But it's the same. It's the same for, I also teach intercultural experiences and so on, but we can't teach all the intercultural experiences. We can just teach that we have processes regarding, you know, different experiences, but the processes are all the same. As human beings, we are all confronted to education, to families, to jobs and everything. So, but we have universal but also unique way of interpreting this, and we know that we are sometimes categorized in the way we think or we propose a singular or unique approach of it. But when we are aware of this, well, it's, you know, it's just like a relief. Well, I see that with my students when we teach that, and I say, you know, it's the same for multilingualism, plurilingualism, and intercultural experiences. We can't teach all this. We can't teach all French. It's not possible. You will not be able to master French. Even me, I don't master French. It's my first language. So, so that it's just, you know, a fantasy. And, but what we know is how it functions, the way we can do to learn it. We can do anything against the fact that we can be stigmatized and so on. But we know it exists, and we know the way to recognize it. We know to deconstruct it, and I think maybe it's what we can do in education, the best we can do.
There's been an ongoing Zoom chat conversation as well, but I think I will just simply reflect a theme that I've seen, which is appreciation for your talk, and also appreciation for the fact that we don't often hear necessarily what's happening on the European side of this equation. And there were comments, multiple comments saying that we're glad to get this insight into this other, the other side of the Atlantic and what's happening there.
Any other questions? I have one more I'll ask you. Maybe good one. So thank you so much.
Thank you.